Hello and welcome to the Sovereignty, Security and Scale presentation with the subtitle, Why the Application Platform is Non-Negotiable. My name is Lars and I've been in cloud computing for almost 20 years now. I've worked in industry and in academia. I have a PhD in computer science for my work with the cloud. And quite a lot of people think that I write reasonable things online. I'm very passionate about tech and cybersecurity topics. And that's what this is going to be about today as well. For those of you that don't know what an application platform is, let's start there. So an application platform is a set of software that runs on servers. On these servers, it creates an ecosystem of various supporting services that your typical web applications, API services, AI or data apps will need, such as a database. And it also provides various security and observability services so that those don't all have to be built into every single application. In that way, you can see it as something that's about standardization of the boring admin stuff and therefore efficiency. Now, if your application platform is very good, it can run on all kinds of servers, whether they are in the public or private cloud, on-premise, in your own data center somewhere, or even in air-gapped environments. Say, if your applications need to service the defense sector, some power plant, a hospital, places where loss of internet connection isn't acceptable as a reason for things not working. The application platform standardizes how applications run on those servers so that your staff is both more efficient at operating the systems and at developing the applications, because they can depend on smartness from the platform. So, right, with that out of the way, let's dive into sovereignty, or as I like to call it, the ability to control your own destiny. Now, when it comes to the legal landscape, the Cloud Act requires disclosure of electronic records to U.S. authorities, regardless of whether the record is stored or processed in or outside of the U.S. A court order is required. So it's not, everything you put in the cloud gets to be read by the US authorities, but that everything might. And if that happens, providers won't tell you. FISA Section 702 allows the US intelligence community, which is, all those three-letter acronym agencies that you know from the movies and a few more, to collect foreign information related to threats to national security. It has to be targeted towards specific individuals, and the information collected is so deeply targeted and personal that the intelligence community actually have to pinky swear that they won't do the same to US persons. Of course, if this is carried out, providers will also not actually tell you. In 2023, under the Biden administration, the European Commission deemed the US cloud services adequate under GDPR, because there would be a politically impartial oversight board for privacy and civil liberties. But then Trump took power. And one of the first things the Trump administration did was dismiss the 3 Democratic members of that board, including the board's chair. As a result, the board has lost its voting quorum, leaving it unable to function effectively, as only 1 member remains. And this is still true to this day. Now, the European Commission has not revisited its decision, in spite of how troublesome this ought to be, considering how central this PCLOB was to the adequacy decision to begin with. Since a while ago, there is, however, a way to score how sovereign a solution is, thanks to work by the European Commission, the Cloud Sovereignty Framework of 2025. And in April of 26, 4 vendors were chosen for strategic procurement of cloud services based in part on their scores. You don't have to scratch very deep below the surface, however, to see how Google is benefiting from 3 of those 4 deals. And I don't know what to tell you, besides that I'm pretty disappointed as an EU citizen. As for threats to our digital society overall, our Swedish security service, SÄPO, and our National Defense Radio Establishment, FRA, find that cybercrime will be more active and that the use of vulnerabilities and directed attacks are on the rise for 2026. Our current geopolitical situation forces us to really consider our use of cloud services, especially by providers under other legislation than ours. There is significant sovereignty washing going on as well. So all hyperscaler vendors are now presenting solutions, yet again, to problems that they've spent years claiming to have solved many times over by now. This is a clear security risk related to availability and thus to security overall. A political decision can either forcefully turn off your access to either your entire infrastructure or to a managed service, or to product security updates, which impact security down the line. Or it could even become illegal if the EU rules that way. So if you've been paying attention, the simple summary is that risk assessments look different now. You must be prepared. But how? Well, to break our dependency on cloud services that are out of control and to regain sovereignty, we need services that we control ourselves. And the fancy word for that is cloud agnosticism, to not tie ourselves to just one cloud provider's set of specific services. Now, to do that sounds super efficient, of course, that they will gladly help you to tie yourself to them, but the price you pay is a loss of independence. And while it's theoretically possible to move from one cloud to another, it's often a pretty big task because so much will typically depend on the provider's way of offering their services. Internal processes depend on it, your permission levels, etc. And the list is actually very long and extends well beyond just, yeah, we're using this open source database, we're fine. I've met plenty of people who display an enormous amount of overconfidence regarding this simply because they don't take the whole big picture view into account. Anyway, if you have a good application platform, you're able to run anywhere. And as long as you just get any old servers, you're good to go. This means that you stay agile because you're not tied down to any one particular provider. And your processes and security posture is the same regardless of underlying cloud, which means that you don't have to train staff on the intricacies of several different clouds because you just know also that they will get like one favorite that they prioritize over all the others. So not a great idea. Get something that unifies across all clouds and is tied to neither, and then you can have true sovereignty. Okay, so let's talk more about security, or the ability to protect what's yours. I claim that security should be built into the application platform. And why is that? Well, because then it will always be present for all your server-side applications. Even the lowliest little script that needs to run once a week deserves the full security suite. You know that saying about how a chain is only as strong as its weakest link? Well, that definitely applies to cybersecurity as well. The good thing is, though, that security measures are not actually unique. Your applications are. But good security measures, they're universal. And while some may sound basic, the truth of the matter is that most organizations fail to implement them anyways. So what are some of these security measures that I'm talking about? Well, consider that this icon on the right is your application. So first, we apply application isolation. We operate on a default deny philosophy. Applications are sandboxed, and we strictly limit their capabilities at the operating system level. Furthermore, network paths are explicitly defined. So if service A doesn't have a business requirement to talk to service B, that network route simply does not exist. Firewalls outside of the application prevent such network calls. This drastically reduces the blast radius of any potential compromise. Second, we can enforce encryption everywhere. This means data at rest, data in transit. We don't rely on the assumption that our internal networks are safe. So by enforcing network encryption between services and encryption for all storage volumes, we ensure that even if a boundary is breached, the data itself remains protected. Moving to secrets and configuration. One should never hard code sensitive data. Instead, use dedicated centralized secrets management systems. And this allows us to inject credentials dynamically at runtime and to rotate them seamlessly and according to policies. And audit trails exist for which service accessed which secret and when. Fourth, a continuous scanning apparatus. We shift security left by scanning infrastructure as code and container images during the CI/CD pipeline, catching vulnerabilities before they get deployed. But we also scan at runtime because software does not get deployed, daily in all businesses, especially not in critical infrastructure. So scanning should happen at a regular basis for everything that's running in the cluster as well. And we actively monitor for intrusions and anomalous behavior within clusters, giving us a continuous feedback loop on a real-time security health. So intrusion detection systems. Fifth, observability is also a critical security tool. We need to observe our systems in depth from the outside looking in. This means capturing comprehensive audit logs and routing them to a centralized, tamper-proof storage system. In the event of an incident, these immutable records are our source of truth for forensic analysis and compliance. Finally, we implement fine-grained permissions everywhere because identity is our ultimate perimeter. We apply the principle of least privilege relentlessly, not just for human operators, but for applications and machine identities as well. A service account should only have the exact permissions it needs to execute its specific function and absolutely nothing more. By treating these principles as code and by automating their enforcement, we build a platform that is resilient by design. And most importantly, all of this happens outside of the application's own control. Because if any of this is up to the application itself, then a hacker could simply disable these security measures if they manage to hack into the application. So this is key. Has to come from the application platform. So let's talk about scale now, or the ability to reach your full potential. In my mind, scale requires 4 things. Focus on the right things and only the right things. Simplicity and automation for the rest. Confidence due to managing risks correctly. And speed that comes from knowing that you don't have to revisit decisions over and over again. So essentially, decision execution and iteration are what matters, nothing more. What does it look like in practice to do this in the cloud? Well, most traditional infrastructure operations are imperative. We tell systems how to do things step by step. But with Kubernetes and an application platform like our Velkin, we flip this script. We shift to a declarative model instead. So instead of telling the system how to do something, we describe what we want. And then the platform figures out how to get there and stay there even when things go wrong. So first, you can specify that you want to run version 1.0.1 of an application. Okay, that's simple enough. But we also tell the system to auto-scale intelligently between 3 and 10 instances, targeting around 60% CPU usage. And to deploy cross servers to ensure fault tolerance. And to connect to the right database using securely fed credentials into the application. And to attach, say, 50 gigabytes of persistent storage that stays with the application, even if it moves from one server to another. And during upgrades, to only replace one instance at a time and to only continue rolling out the upgrade if the new version reports that it's healthy according to tests that you've written. And when time comes to shut down, such as when scaling down or upgrading or whatever, to make sure to do that in a graceful way. Now, all of this gets automated. There are no manual steps, and the platform is responsible for constantly reconciling towards this desired state. Oh, yeah. And to ensure that everything remains true over time. So even if a server would crash. So the bottom line is this. Even if a server crashes or the network hiccups, all of this self-heals. Operations are goal-driven, and your software's uniqueness doesn't mean that your operations need to be built in a custom way every time. You should spend time on what brings value. You should commoditize and automate the rest. Note how none of this that I showed really is very application specific, but applies to all kinds of applications. With control comes confidence, and with confidence comes freedom to innovate and to scale. So this is why your security checks have to be automated. You need the confidence that provides. Similarly, compliance documentation also gives confidence. You know you won't spend forever trying to prove your compliance. You're audit ready from day one and throughout the entire life cycle of your application. Best practices, both in terms of security and your own organizational controls, should be enforced at all times. And the best way to do this is via policy as code, automated enforcement of your policies. Have them documented and always on, and your auditor will love you. You should focus on what matters and automate the boring parts. Eliminate manual barriers and gain speed. An application platform should provide you with all you need in this department. Operational efficiency gains are a given if you can streamline workflows and support them and yourself with automation. Our platform users only change source code and work with pull requests. Automation handles correct deployment and operations. That's what you want. What you don't want is key person dependencies. You know, the one like tech genius person in the organization who actually knows how it all works? That is a huge business risk, because what happens when that person leaves? Who can realistically take over? Who will keep your production system up and running? Avoid that whole risk and get your platform as a product or as a managed service instead. And this all brings us to Velkin by Elasys. Velkin is purpose-built to support software in sectors where availability, reliability, and compliance aren't negotiable. It's turnkey, which means that you don't have to assemble your own stack of tools. Velkin comes with the entire platform needed to run workloads in production, even with the toughest security requirements. It's secure by design, not as an afterthought. From audit logs to role-based asset controls to policy as code enforcement, every layer has security and compliance embedded. It is fully cloud agnostic. You can run it on the major clouds if you want, national or regional ones, your private cloud, on-premises, even air-gapped environments. The experience will be consistent. The platform is also built on a certified Kubernetes, ensure compatibility and supportability. Most importantly, this is about enabling your software teams to deliver value faster with your applications hosted on any infrastructure. Zero compromises. When we designed Velkin, we used ISO 27001 as our starting point. The technical controls informed which components we would need, so we composed, configured, and documented everything. It's all audit ready, and we continuously keep it up to date at all times as the ecosystem changes. And during Velkin's lifetime in production since 2019, quite a few components have changed. A look at the components on a very high level is the next slide. You got a base layer of Kubernetes, and then various platform tools on top, such as the whole virtual and secure networking stack, container registry with vulnerability scanning features, runtime security, policy as code, and single sign-on. You know, all the good stuff. A PostgreSQL database, a RabbitMQ message queue, Argo CD to do continuous delivery, and a Redis-compatible distributed cache all serve as extensions that make it a fully featured platform by any reasonable definition. And customers that need to run, for instance, MongoDB can do so in a secure way that we prepared for them in the platform as well, with verified application building blocks. All that is to serve the application that is on top. When I show this to others in this space, they basically just nod and say, yep, that's the platform we would have built ourselves. The fact that it's unsurprising is very good here. That means onboarding will be easy for people working in the field, and they can have full focus on what matters. And that's one of the requirements of scaling. Velkin can be consumed in two different ways: as a product where you run with our support, or as a fully managed service where we manage it on top of selected cloud partners for you. All of those partners are either fully European or even entirely Swedish. So no legal question marks, but with a global reach and presence. So what have we learned here today? Well, sovereignty is needed more than ever. The risk assessments look different now, and you've never been able to outsource risk. It's yours to handle, so you have to put yourself in control. I've made the case that security should be built into your platform because security measures are not unique. Your applications are. And that enforcement of security has to come from somewhere outside of the applications, because otherwise a hacker can just disable the security measures. And what about applications that don't have all security features to begin with? By layering security on top of an application and protecting it from attacks and security mistakes, we have what's known as defense in depth. Some also call a similar idea zero trust architecture. Regardless of what you call it, the point is the same. Only run software you think you can trust from vendors you trust, but at the same time, do not trust applications to be secure. Treat the applications running as something that the cat dragged in. You'll be glad you did. Because if you do, you've raised the bar so much that you can focus on what matters. And this is how you scale via commodification, confidence, and compliance. Thank you.